Sometimes I stay up too late because I didn't get enough time to be a human after work.
I'm so burnt out from work that even on the weekends, I do not feel like I am resting.
The biggest part of becoming an adult is just realizing that free time doesn't exist anymore. It just hides behind guilt.
God damn, we only got time to work, bitch. Work, 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 work.
This video has taken me weeks to make, and even after a week-long vacation away from work, I still felt just as tired and unmotivated as ever to keep working on my passion of making YouTube videos, and I was so confused as to why that was. And I know it just can't be me, because I know you have seen it all over social media yourself, with people feeling so exhausted after an 8-hour work shift, with a 1-hour break that doesn't even feel like a break, and the many hours of course that are also spent driving and either preparing for work or unwinding from it. And even when we're not working, we still feel as exhausted as ever. And in the many weeks I've attempted to muster up the energy to make this very video while balancing my work and daily life, all it took was a sudden burst of just 3 hours, starting from scratch and logging in, to finally help me answer the same questions you probably have felt but never asked out loud yourself. Why does it feel like we don't have time for anything anymore? Where's my time actually going? Why am I tired even when I'm not working? And why can't we just work less? And most importantly, what can we do about all of this? Because with how busy we all are, and with every small moment of our free time we have left just being spent doom scrolling on our phones now, I want to, by the end of this video, allow you to understand how you can reclaim your time and spend it being the actual person you want to be, instead of just becoming the homogenous sea of people we've become, going to bed on our phones, exhausted by everything in our lives, wishing we could do something more meaningful with our time. So first, let's answer the simplest version of this question. Why does it feel like we have less free time than people did back then? Economists have actually been running something called the time diary studies for decades, and what they do is they get thousands of people to basically write down everything they did the day before. It is one of the more reliable ways we have to measure how a society actually spends its hours, because it is a lot harder to lie to a diary than it is to answer a survey that just asks you if you feel busy. Two economists, Mark Aguiar and Eric Hurst, took 5 decades of these diaries and lined them all up all the way from 1965 to the 2000s. And what they found is that across time, leisure time actually went up. On average, Americans gain roughly the equivalent of 5 to 10 extra weeks of vacation a year compared to 1965. So I mean, think about that for a second. On paper, we somehow have more free time than any generation before us, when considering the fact that we all probably pictured boomers coming back home from work with dinner already made by their wives as they watch TV until bedtime. But what Aguiar and Hurst also found was that they also seem to actually enjoy their leisure time much differently than we do in the modern times. And look, with any discussion online nowadays, there's a great deal of nuance to be had. So it is true that by almost every measure on paper, we are richer than any humans who have ever lived, but that is not obviously how it feels on the ground. Because in that same research, Aguiar and Hurst also found the ones with more hours for leisures also reported feeling more rushed and more starved for time than people did 40 years ago. The same way you and I feel. The raw leisure times went up, but the feeling of actually having those hours to ourselves went down. This means somehow that I have more time than my grandfather ever had, and yet I also feel like I've been more time poor than he ever was. Both of those things are somehow true when it should feel impossible. So of course the real question is, why don't we have enough time? Because technically we do have more of it. The real question is what is happening between that time and the space between the clock and the feeling itself, and something is getting in there and hollowing out the hours before they actually ever reach me and you. A journalist named Bridget Schultz coined the term time confetti, and the image is exactly what it honestly sounds like. Your free time is not one clean block anymore, the way it may have been 30 years ago. Because nowadays, it's all shredded into tiny little scraps, which is like a minute here, 5 minutes there, little pieces scattered across your whole day like confetti, and not one of them is actually big enough to do anything with. A researcher named Ashley Willens studied this, and she had a really interesting demonstration that I'll read to you because I think it is actually pretty interesting. Let's say you have 1 hour leisure at 7 p.m. During that hour, you receive 2 emails. Check both and respond to 1, 3 Slack notifications from colleagues asking you questions or a favor, of which you answer 1 and ignore 2, 1 alarm reminding you to call your mother tomorrow on her birthday, 4 texts from a friend trying to make plans for next weekend, all 4 of which you replied to. Willens went on to mention that in the figure on the screen, you can see how all these tiny little interruptions in time really start to add up to 2 interesting takeaways. She mentions that the first thing is that within that hour, already 10% of that time is just simply gone. Whalen goes on to find that the second, more invasive effect of time confetti is the way it fragments that 1 hour of leisure. As you can see on screen for her second figure, any hope of sinking your teeth into anything meaningful is lost when you're always fighting the battle to reclaim your time in a way 30 years ago just simply wasn't. And another thing I wanted to take away that I've observed of my own behavior and as I've seen on social media is that I feel like we've all started to become normalized to this constant sense of fragmentation to the point where it never feels like anyone can commit to a hobby nowadays. I mean, hell, the friction it takes for me to set up this recording setup right here or to grab my laptop and start scripting is washed away by the frictionless act of just more doom scrolling, because it's just not worth the hassle when the 3 hours to me doesn't feel like 3 hours, but instead smaller chunks of an activity that at any point I can just stop doing to be on my phone instead. It's no secret to anyone now that if you ask anyone nowadays what's their hobby, you can tell that we all get too embarrassed to say that we all go on our phone for hours every night. So we default to the hobby we probably used to have as a kid, or for example hiking, which is an activity you do maybe once a month, instead of just saying the thing that we all probably all collectively do. And I don't want you to get the wrong idea either by me mentioning it so many times, but the end of this video isn't just put down your phone and you'll be happy, because for a lot of people, if your phone is where you genuinely find your joy and connection in the world, then great. But understand this, scrolling is the only kind of leisure that survives being chopped into pieces. For example, you can stop and start it 100 times and lose nothing. There's zero startup cost and more importantly, zero commitment. So by this point, I just want to make it abundantly clear that it is not because we chose the phone over fulfilling hobbies, or the fact that the desire for hobbies or literally anything other doom scrolling even went anywhere. What did disappear is a long, unbroken stretch of time that fulfilling hobbies and novel interests get to take place and breathe. And of course, the only thing that can survive is a phone that slides into the empty space in the same way water finds a crack. And so by the time I was making this video, I had been coming up with answers to explain why our time feels so stolen that I never even thought for a moment about the one thing that's actually taking most of our waking hours away from us. I mean, look at how hard we're all trying to protect our leisure. Countless productivity YouTube channels, self-help books, and apps all trying to cleanse your mind and give you a dopamine detox. I mean, we're all literally out here trying to defend the little crumbs of spare time we have after work and on the weekends, while our society itself deems to be that the 40+ hours we work every week to be a necessity. So let's talk about it. In 1930, an economist named John Maynard Keynes sat down and wrote an essay with a beautiful title, Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. And in it, he made a prediction, not about people in general, but about us, specifically about the people living 100 years later, which is basically right now. He looked at how fast machines were making us more productive, and he concluded that his grandchildren would barely have to work. He figured that the wealth would multiply, and that the people would obviously have to trade some of that abundance for time. And to think that he wasn't even wrong about the fact that machines and technology would make us so productive. Now, this graph right here is probably not the first time you've seen this graph about how our productivity has soared and how our wages have stagnated. But oftentimes, we see this graph in the abstract and fail to understand, especially the first part, about what our luxuries have actually resulted in with our increased productivity and what this actually afforded us. And economists have actually spent decades trying to explain why this free time never ended up showing up. And the cleanest version of what they found comes down to something they call the substitution effect. So here's this idea. As we got more productive, our time got more valuable. So every hour of leisure that we took started to cost us more in potential earnings. So instead of cashing those gains out as free time, we kept working to earn more and buy more. So generation after generation, we got richer, and we as a collective of people chose to spend it more on stuff at the end of the day. But of course, to say that the issue of having no free time is a result of society choosing material goods over leisure would be ignorant of all the things that visibly surround us every day. None of these very real facts still change the fact that we still feel stretched every day, unable to be present and enjoying the luxuries that we do have. But the more inspiring perspective that I want you to take is actually that we can choose to change that narrative and flip everything we thought we knew about work and productivity on its head. Because we've come to expect the 5-day work week that we all take for granted as the natural order of things, when in reality the 5-day work week is anything but natural. Henry Ford advocated hugely for the 5-day work week back in the 1920s, partly because he realized that rested workers were actually better workers. And also partly because he wanted people to have a free Saturday to go spend the money they had earned all week to buy the cars he was making. Which honestly just makes sense. I mean, even if you are the most cold-blooded business person alive, giving people time off to spend money and come back sharper is objectively smart. Even more than that idea that I wanted to focus on is the fact that someone chose that, and therefore we can choose again differently. And so of course, this is exactly why I got so drawn to the 4-day work week, and with how so much of technology has progressed and how many innovations has come because of the internet, that we should have more free time by now, I feel like, and yet we don't. So of course, a natural question then arises, why can't we just work less? In July of 2025, sociologists at Boston College ran the largest controlled trial of the 4-day workweek ever done. Almost 2,900 employees, 141 companies, and 6 countries, all published by In Nature Human Behavior. And as you can expect, there were sweeping results that showed just how beneficial this was, with burnout being all the way down, job satisfaction going up, physical and mental health were of course better than ever, and more importantly, stress was lower than ever, even though everyone thought that cramming work into 4 days would have been impossible. And something to keep in mind as well was that the 4-day workweek succeeded because they followed the 180-100 model, which said that you receive 100% of the same pay, working 80% of those hours at the same 100% of output. So with these set parameters in place, companies of course finally had to start looking at how to actually run themselves in order to cut down on any pointless meetings and glaring efficiencies in order to make this model work. And when the trials eventually ended, over 90% of these companies kept the 4-day workweek just simply because it worked better for them. I think more people have to realize that businesses ultimately care about their bottom line at the end of the day, and that these businesses ultimately made this decision because they realized how much more efficient they were when they decided to work less. And of course, everyone was happier for it. Who wouldn't be? And to any naysayers who say that this is simply a model that won't work for shift works like restaurants and hospitals, let me say that you're kind of right actually. Because of course in work that's based on your physical presence to attend to people and machines, it means that there isn't just a 30-minute meeting you can cut to save your time and money. But of course, this doesn't also mean that we shouldn't try to look for a solution, because it's clear at this point that the solution to make the 4-day workweek model operate in environments such as these isn't to be more efficient, it's just to have better coverage of more people. Because the thing about jobs precisely in these shift-based industries is that there is just so much turnover. Think about the fact that if you worked at a hospital, how much time and money it takes to train up a new nurse from scratch only for them to quit because of the crazy demands of the job and burnout. Wouldn't it just make sense for more people to spread the work evenly so you're not just having a rotating door of employees? Now, I'm not going to pretend like this solution is simple, because of course there's a great deal of nuance on how to actually execute on that sort of practice. The 4-day work week in hospitality and hospitals like these still face many challenges when staffing shortages are already a huge problem to begin with. Nurses are still expected to work on holidays and may very well need to work as much as 6 to 7 consecutive days before even having a day off. But fact of the matter remains that it's been shown in countless case studies that when we prioritize not burning out our workers, everyone's better off for it. In a pilot study by Cambridge University and 4-Day Week Global, 71% of participants reported feeling less burnt out, while there was a 57% fall in staff resignations. All of this mounting evidence in favor of the 4-day workweek almost always concludes on this very basic idea, that the logistics of actually figuring out how to implement the 4-day workweek was never the hard part. The hard part has always been letting ourselves believe that we're even allowed to want this. Because here's the thing. We as a society still somehow debate about this controversial topic for some reason as some radical idea that we fail to consider just how absurd this conversation is in the first place. Think for a moment that we already had the 4-day work week and we're in this hypothetical world where the output is identical as studies have shown and productivity is still as strong as it ever is. And some random guy stands up and goes, you know what, let's just tack on a 5th day. Let's work more hours, have less rest, and produce the same exact amount of work. You'd think he lost his mind. You'd ask him what possible reason there could be to make billions of people work more when we obviously don't have to. And this is the exact situation that we're frozen in right now, just held in place by all we've ever known. So while there are so many people who are either staring at the clock waiting for their day in the office to end, or people rushing in the frantic demands of their fast-paced work environment, there sits hundreds of thousands of people with degrees in our generation who freshly just graduated who still can't find work at all. I mean, I just want to say this. A 4-day work week will not only address the issues of the former, but it would also address the issues of the latter by providing an opportunity to the many of graduates living right now in this crazy fucking job market that we're all feeling right now, by the way, with all these memes also suggesting as well that job or no job, we are all burnt and broke all the same. Now, maybe I've sold you, and maybe part of you is still sitting there going, sure, but how is this ever actually going to happen? All fair questions, after all, and we still do live in a world where you can prove that the earth is round and people will still fight you on it, right? So good luck trying to convince the whole country that's worked 5 days its entire life that somehow 4 is just a better way of working. Except, here's the hard part that everyone often forgets. Because we've already done this exact same thing before, and it was so much harder the first time. Because back in the 1890s, the average full-time manufacturing worker was no joke working as much as 100 hours a week. 16-hour workdays were once considered normal as parents worked alongside their children until both of their bodies gave up. So how did that nightmare turn into the 2-day weekend and an 8-hour day that you have right now? People. Regular, work-to-the-bone people who decided that they were allowed to want more, and so they organized, and some of them literally died for it, and then they forced it into law. So in 1916, it took hundreds of thousands of railroad workers threatening to shut down the entire country just to win the first federal 8-hour workday. And in 1938, the government that the people elected passed a law that made the 40-hour work week the standard and finally kicked the kids out of factories. So this is something I really do need you to sit with, because the weekend itself is not a natural thing. Every single piece of free time that you have today was once given to you by people who had it 100 times worse than you and chose to fight for something better anyways. So no, the 4-day work week is not just some naive fantasy, it is just a next step on a road we have already been walking for 100 years. And here's a part that I really want to mention that makes this all feel real and not just some pipe dream, because the next step for the 32-hour workweek already exists. The bill that is being proposed right now is the 32-hour Workweek Act, which is written by Senator Bernie Sanders and Congressman Mark Takano. And the crazy thing is that it doesn't even write in a brand new law. It amends the same Fair Labor Standards Act from 1938, which is the one that gave us the weekend in the first place. It would move the standard work week from 40 hours down to 32 over 4 years with 0 cuts to your pay, and is backed by nearly every major union in the country. And if you haven't heard of the bill up until this point right now, it's because it's all but dead. We aren't mad enough. We have to go out there and actually do something about it. So what is that something? It's voting. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's literally just voting. I want you to look at this graph right here that I keep staring at every major election, not just a presidential one, but every one smaller than that. And look how few young people actually show up. I want to bet that some of the people watching this video, or I hope even most of you guys, are within this age range of 18 to 24. If even a sliver more of us young people actually went out to vote as often as boomers do, it would crack this whole thing wide open and we would actually have more politicians represent the young people's interests, which is to have a 32-hour work week amongst many other awesome things. And I don't just mean vote for the president. I mean your mayor, your city council, your school board, the tiny local races no one shows up for, which are exactly the ones with a handful of votes can actually swing, and exactly the ones that quietly decide the decisions and the conditions that we all live in. When you get that ballot in your mail, fill it out for the love of God. This is the whole ask that I ask of you, because the moment we all start showing up, the people in power start showing up for us, the same way that they finally did for workers who won us the weekend 100 years ago. Because the most foundational principle that I have built this channel off of, that I intend to leave every viewer with by the end of this video, is an astounding amount of hope. Because what I do know is that the opposite of hope is despair, and despair has never once built a single thing. The only people who have ever changed anything are the people who have only ever believed that something was possible when it felt like it wasn't. So with that being said, I'm sure you still came to this video in part because you want to learn how to still reclaim your time, and this is a promise I am now going to fulfill. So here are a few things, actually 2 things you can do to help you start reclaiming your time starting today. The first thing you must do is you need to find a block of time that you can use to intentionally do what you want to do and protect it as best as you possibly can. Because if you just vaguely block it out for 3 hours of free time, that time will just get eaten up by every other thing you suddenly have to do. So if you must, put it on the calendar at every night, the same time every week if you have to. That's your hour to play guitar, to go hiking, to go crochet, Do whatever it is so that you feel like you're actually doing something worthwhile, and defend it exactly as you would if you were trying to have a meeting with your boss. Now, if you do that enough times, you stop actually feeling guilty for taking time for yourself, and you actually start being present in your own life and actually living out whatever makes you, you. And of course, the second, even more important thing is that you give this block of time a very definitive start and a hard end. You can go to a coffee shop to get your work done, or you can even just set a simple alarm to know when you're just finished with whatever you're doing. I've actually done both of these as well, that's why I'm saying it. Because all you really need is a physical signal that tells your body that your work and chores at this time are over, and that this time right now belongs to you. And that it signals that there's a beginning and end, and therefore it stops the bleeding into everything you do and stops all that time confetti that always takes over your whole life. One night, I did the exact thing that I told you guys to do. I built a wall around the 3 hours, and I just marked the start and I marked the end, and I locked in. I kept working until my alarm went off so I can eat dinner, and this is literally the only reason why this video works at all. Because of that initial 3 hours, I was able to carry that motivation on to continue and finish this video, and to finally put pen into paper to say everything I wanted to say about the 4-day work week and where our time went, because this was something that really meant a lot to me. And so for the first time in really truly in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was one more exhausted person in this homogenous sea of us. And so while I am still trying to be consistent, more often than not at least, I am still able to go to bed, still on my phone to be fair, at least feeling glad that I worked on something that actually mattered to me. So I ask that you do the same for yourself. And also go vote. Thank you.